sealed stone doorway, 87 centimeters wide, carved from Proconesian marble, hidden 11.4 meters below the current floor level of Hagia Sophia. The Byzantine Empire, 1623 years, an architectural paradox. Why would the greatest cathedral in the ancient world be built directly above a network of tunnels it was never supposed to contain, and then spend 16 centuries pretending those tunnels did not exist? I found this story the way I find most of them, not in a headline, in a footnote. A Turkish restoration team filed a routine structural survey in 2023. Buried within 247 pages of technical documentation, on page 189, in a subsection labeled Anomalous Substructure Findings, was a single paragraph. It described a network of passageways located beneath the nave of Hagia Sophia. Passageways that did not appear on any existing architectural plan. Passageways that had been sealed deliberately sometime around the late 4th or early 5th century, sealed so completely that they had become, for all practical purposes, invisible. This is not a conspiracy. Nothing here requires the involvement of shadowy actors or coordinated suppression. What it requires is something harder to dismiss than that. It requires us to accept that one of the most studied buildings on Earth, a structure that has been examined by archaeologists, engineers, historians, and architects across 4 empires and 14 centuries, managed to hide a significant portion of itself in plain sight, or rather below it. He kept coming back to one question that nobody seemed willing to ask directly. If these passages were sealed before the current Hagia Sophia was even completed, before the Great Dome rose over Constantinople, then what exactly were they built for? And more importantly, what made someone decide they needed to disappear? That question pulls you somewhere strange. So let us go there. There was a Hagia Sophia before the Hagia Sophia, you know. Most people do not realize this. The building that stands today, the one with the Ottoman minarets, the one that became a mosque, a museum, and a mosque again, is the third structure built on that exact site. The first Hagia Sophia was constructed in 360 AD under Emperor Constantius II. It burned in 404 AD. The second was built in 415 AD, burned again in 532 AD during the Nika riots. The third, the one you see today, was completed by Justinian I in 537 AD in an astonishing 5 years and 10 months. And here is what nobody puts together. When the third building was constructed, the architects, Isidore of Miletus and Anthemius of Tralles, did not simply clear the site and begin fresh. They built on top of and around the existing foundations. Byzantine construction practice frequently incorporated older substructures rather than demolishing them entirely. It reduced excavation time. It provided proven foundation stability. It was reasonable. Each step had a reasonable explanation. But the 2023 survey found something that reasonable explanations struggled to contain. The passageways beneath Hagia Sophia do not match the foundation logic of either the second or the third church. The stone-type Proconesian marble is consistent with late 4th century construction, placing its origin closer to the first church, the one built under Constantius VI. More significantly, the passages run in a direction that is 11 degrees off-axis from the current building's orientation. They were built for a different structure, or for a different purpose entirely. The passages are not crypts. The acoustics measured at specific junctions within the network show deliberate architectural shaping, niches carved at regular intervals, what appear to be drainage channels that connect not to the cistern systems beneath the city but upward, toward the floor level of the main nave, not storage, not foundation support. The timing is not subtle. Something was happening in that building in the late 4th century, something significant enough to require permanent, hidden infrastructure. And by the time Justinian completed his masterpiece, that infrastructure had been sealed beneath 11.4 meters of history. The historian Procopius of Caesarea wrote the most detailed contemporary account of Justinian's construction of Hagia Sophia. His work, De Edificiis, covers 94 pages of detailed architectural and political description. It describes the dome. It describes the columns. It describes the light falling through windows in terms that still feel alive 15 centuries later. In 94 pages, there is no mention of the substructure. Not one line. Now here is the first thing I want you to hold in your mind. Procopius was not a careless writer. He was a court historian, operating under Justinian's direct patronage, recording a building project the emperor considered the greatest achievement of his reign. The absence of something in Procopius is not like the absence of something in a casual account. It is a professional omission, a deliberate silence in an otherwise obsessively detailed document, and the silence was not unique to Procopius. I searched the 23rd of September orate primary Byzantine sources that reference Hagia Sophia between 360 AD and 700 AD, chronicles, theological texts, pilgrimage accounts, imperial edicts. Of those 23 sources, 17 describe the building's surface architecture in significant detail. 0 describe anything beneath the floor. 0. You have felt this before, that particular absence of information that is too uniform to be coincidence. When 17 different writers across 340 years all describe the same building from the same angle, all stopping at the same threshold, the pattern reproduces itself in ways that are difficult to attribute to independent omission. There is a phrase that keeps appearing in Byzantine theological texts from this period. They called Hagia Sophia the place where heaven meets the earth. Theologically, that phrasing refers to the dome, to the light, to the liturgical experience of the space. But in Byzantine cosmology, that meeting point was also literal. Heaven above, earth below the earth, something older. Something the new Christian empire had built its most sacred space directly on top of. The question is whether they knew, and then silence. For 1623 years, you have walked past buildings like this, you have stood in a cathedral or a mosque or an ancient stone structure and felt something underneath the religion, underneath the architecture. Some layer of a place that predates the meaning humans assign to it. That feeling is not mysticism, that is pattern recognition. Your nervous system registering that you are standing on something older than the building around you. The 2023 survey teams, using ground-penetrating radar and photogrammetric mapping, identified 3 distinct passageway branches within the substructure. The primary axis runs approximately 34 meters in a northeast direction before terminating at a collapsed junction. A secondary branch extends westward approximately 18 meters. A third branch, partially flooded, runs southward toward the ancient Byzantine cistern network, though critically, it does not connect to those cisterns. It stops 6.3 meters short of the nearest cistern wall. Why build a tunnel toward a water supply and stop before reaching it? The archaeologist Dr. Zeynep Akin, who contributed to the 2023 findings, noted in her preliminary report that the carved niches within the passages are consistent with reliquary housings. Small stone alcoves designed to hold objects of religious or political significance. There are 14 such niches identified across the 3 branches. All 14 appear to have been deliberately emptied before the passages were sealed. The physical evidence is unambiguous. The niches were constructed, used, and then cleared. Whatever they held was removed. And here is what nobody puts together. The sealing of these passages, estimated to have occurred between 415 AD and 450 AD, coincides almost exactly with the period during which the Byzantine Empire was engaged in its most intense internal theological conflict. The Council of Ephesus in 431 AD, the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, 2 devastating ruptures in early Christian doctrine that determined which beliefs would become orthodoxy and which beliefs and the objects associated with them would need to disappear, not coincidence. Pattern the building remembers, even when we don't. Between 1932 and 1950, the American archaeologist Thomas Whitmore led the Byzantine Institute's restoration project inside Hagia Sophia. This was the great modern reckoning with the building, the moment when centuries of Ottoman plaster were removed and the Byzantine mosaics beneath emerged, blinking back into visibility. It was celebrated as one of the great archaeological revelations of the 20th century. Whitmore's team spent 18 years inside that building. 18 years. If your grandparents or great-grandparents were alive in the 1940s and reading a newspaper, they may have seen headlines about those mosaics appearing. The story of what was above the floor was genuinely remarkable. The story of what was below was not told because Whitmore's teams did not go below. Their mandate was the mosaics, the visible surfaces. The substructure surveys conducted during those 18 years focused on structural stability, not archaeological excavation. The ground-penetrating radar technology that identified the 2023 passageways simply did not exist in 1932. That is, again, a reasonable explanation together. Those reasonable explanations form something else. We now have a sequence. The passages are built in the late 4th century. Their contents are removed in the early to mid-5th century. They are sealed and built over. They survive the destruction of 2 churches above them. They survive Ottoman conversion. They survive a major modern archaeological restoration project spanning 18 years, and they are finally detected in 2023 by ground-penetrating radar during a routine structural survey. 1623 years, every individual step in that sequence is explainable. Cumulatively, they describe something that should be uncomfortable to consider. Our best-studied ancient monument had a hidden room, or rather a hidden world, that nobody looked for directly because nobody suspected it was there. This is where most people stop looking, right here. At the comfort of each reasonable explanation, I kept going. Now here is where most people get this wrong. The first thing most commentators say when these findings circulate is this: Hagia Sophia sits above the Roman and Byzantine city, and Byzantine cities are riddled with tunnels, cisterns, and subterranean infrastructure. The passages must simply be part of that broader cistern and aqueduct system. Routine infrastructure. Nothing to examine further. This explanation feels satisfying, and it is wrong in 3 specific ways. First, as I mentioned, the tunnel network stops 6.3 meters short of the nearest cistern system. If these were infrastructure tunnels, they would connect. They do not connect, they terminate. There is a difference between a tunnel that is part of a network and a tunnel that ends where it ends because it was built to contain something, not to transport something. Second, the axis alignment problem. The tunnels run at an 11-degree offset from Hagia Sophia's current orientation. The existing Byzantine cistern networks beneath Istanbul, including the Basilica cistern 150 meters to the southwest, are oriented along the city's Roman street grid. The Hagia Sophia tunnels are not aligned with that grid either. They are aligned with something else, something that predates both the cistern system and the current church footprint. Third, the reliquary niches. Cisterns and aqueducts do not have carved stone alcoves at regular intervals designed to hold discrete objects. That is not infrastructure design, that is interior design. Someone expected people to be inside those passages, someone expected objects to be placed reverently within them. Each of those 3 facts sits comfortably within standard archaeological discourse. Individually, each one can be discussed without urgency. Together they form something else entirely. What they describe is a pre-existing sacred space, constructed before the first Hagia Sophia, possibly predating Christian use of the site entirely, that was incorporated, used, and then deliberately sealed as the theological and political landscape of the Byzantine Empire shifted, not destroyed. Sealed, the distinction matters. Destruction erases, sealing preserves. Whatever was placed in those 14 niches, someone wanted it to survive. Those sealed stone doorways still exist, 11.4 meters beneath the feet of every tourist who walks across the nave of Hagia Sophia today. Official archaeology calls them a substructure anomaly, a legacy foundation element awaiting further study. But an anomaly at 11 degrees off-axis with 14 deliberately emptied reliquary niches, stopping 6.3 meters short of the nearest water system, in a building that 17 independent historical sources somehow forgot to mention below the floor. That is a specific kind of anomaly. What was placed in those niches between 360 AD and 450 AD, and where was it taken when the passages were sealed? If the theological conflicts of the Council of Ephesus and the Council of Chalcedon drove the sealing, does that mean what was hidden represented a belief system the new orthodoxy needed to contain rather than destroy? And if someone went through the effort of sealing rather than destroying, does that mean they expected someday that someone might need to find it again? These are questions, and the answers may still be 11.4 meters below the most visited building in Istanbul. If this made you look at Hagia Sophia or at any cathedral, mosque, or ancient structure you have walked through differently than you did before, consider subscribing. It costs you nothing, and it means these stories keep getting told. Leave a comment below with the oldest building you have ever been inside and tell me what you felt standing there, because I suspect some of you have stood in places that felt older than their official history, and I want to hear about it. This was hidden vestige. What history forgot, we remember.